Chapter 21. On getting up, Arkady opened the window, and the first object that met his view was Vassily Ivanovich. In an oriental dressing gown girt round the waist with a pocket handkerchief, he was industriously digging in his garden. He perceived his young visitor, and leaning on his spade, he called, "The best of health to you. How have you slept?" "Excellently," answered Arkady. "Here am I, you see, like some Cincinnatus, marking out a bed for late turnips. The time has come now, and thank God for it, when everyone ought to obtain his sustenance with his own hands. It's useless to reckon on others. One must labor oneself. And it turns out that Jean-Jacques Rousseau is right. Half an hour ago, my dear young gentleman, you might have seen me in a totally different position. One peasant woman who complained of looseness, that's how they express it, but in our language, dysentery. How can I express it best? I administered opium. And for another, I extracted a tooth. I proposed an anesthetic to her, but she would not consent. All that I do gratis, on the material. I'm used to it, though. You see, I'm a plebeian, homo novus, not one of the old stock, not like my spouse. Wouldn't you like to come this way into the shade, to breathe the morning freshness a little before tea?" Arkady went out to him. "Welcome once again," said Vassily Ivanovich, raising his hand in a military salute to the greasy skullcap which covered his head. "You, I know, are accustomed to luxury, to amusements, but even the great ones of this world do not disdain to spend a brief space under a cottage roof." "Good heavens," protested Arkady, "as though I were one of the great ones of this world, and I'm not accustomed to luxury." Pardon me, rejoined Vassily Ivanovich with a polite simper. "Though I am laid on the shelf now, I have knocked about the world too. I can tell a bird by its flight. I am something of a psychologist too in my own way, and a physiognomist. If I had not, I will venture to say, been endowed with that gift, I should have come to grief long ago. I should have stood no chance, a poor man like me. I tell you, without flattery, I am sincerely delighted at the friendship I observe between you and my son. I have just seen him. He got up, as he usually does, no doubt you are aware of it, very early, and went for a ramble about the neighborhood. Permit me to inquire, have you known my son long?" "Since last winter." "Indeed. And permit me to question you further, but hadn't we better sit down? Permit me, as a father, to ask without reserve, what is your opinion of my Yevgeny?" "Your son is one of the most remarkable men I have ever met," Arkady answered emphatically. Vassily Ivanovich's eyes suddenly grew round, and his cheeks were suffused with a faint flush. The spade fell out of his hand. "And so, you expect," he began. "I'm convinced," Arkady put in, "that your son has a great future before him, that he will do honor to your name. I've been certain of that ever since I first met him." How was that?" Vassily Ivanovich articulated with an effort. His wide mouth was relaxed in a triumphant smile which would not leave it. "Would you like me to tell you how we met?" "Yes, and altogether." Arkady began to tell his tale, and to talk of Bazarov with even greater warmth, even greater enthusiasm than he had done on the evening when he danced a mazurka with Madame Odintsov. Vassily Ivanovich listened and listened, blinked and rolled his handkerchief up into a ball in both his hands, cleared his throat, ruffled up his hair, and at last could stand it no longer. He bent down to Arkady and kissed him on his shoulder. "You have made me perfectly happy," he said, never ceasing to smile. "I ought to tell you, I idolize my son. My old wife I won't speak of. We all know what mothers are, but I dare not show my feelings before him because he doesn't like it. He is averse to every kind of demonstration of feeling. Many people even find fault with him for such firmness of character and regard it as a proof of pride or lack of feeling. But men like him ought not to be judged by the common standard, ought they? And here, for example, many another fellow in his place would have been a constant drag on his parents. But he, would you believe it, has never from the day he was born taken a kopeck more than he could help. That's God's truth. He is a disinterested, honest man, observed Arkady. Exactly so. He is disinterested. And I don't only idolize him, Arkady Nikolaevich. I am proud of him. And the height of my ambition is that someday there will be the following lines in his biography. The son of a simple army doctor, who was, however, capable of divining his greatness betimes, and spared nothing for his education. The old man's voice broke. Arkady pressed his hand. "What do you think?" inquired Vassily Ivanovich after a short silence. "Will it be in the career of medicine that he will attain the celebrity you anticipate for him?" "Of course, not in medicine, though even in that department he will be one of the leading scientific men." "In what, then, Arkady Nikolaevich?" "It would be hard to say now, but he will be famous." "He will be famous," repeated the old man, and he sank into a reverie. "Arina Vlasyevna sent me to call you in to tea," announced Fenichka, coming by with an immense dish of ripe raspberries. Vassily Ivanovich started. "And will there be cold cream for the raspberries?" "Yes. Cold now, mind. Don't stand on ceremony, Arkady Nikolaevich. Take some more. How is it Yevgeny doesn't come?" "I'm here," was heard Bazarov's voice from Arkady's room. Vassily Ivanovich turned round quickly. "Aha! You wanted to pay a visit to your friend, but you were too late, Amiche, and we have already had a long conversation with him. Now we must go into tea. Mother summons us. By the way, I want to have a little talk with you." "What about?" "There's a peasant here. He's suffering from icterus." "You mean jaundice?" "Yes, a chronic and very obstinate case of icterus. I have prescribed him Centauri and St. John's wort, ordered him to eat carrots, given him soda, but all that's merely palliative measures. We want some more decided treatment. Though you do laugh at medicine, I am certain you can give me practical advice. But we will talk of that later. Now come into tea." Vassily Ivanovich jumped up briskly from the garden seat and hummed from Robert le Diable. The rule we set ourselves, to live for pleasure." "Singular vitality," observed Bazarov, going away from the window. It was midday. The sun was burning hot behind a thin veil of unbroken whitish clouds. Everything was hushed. There was no sound but the cocks crowing irritably at one another in the village, producing in everyone who heard them a strange sense of drowsiness and ennui. And somewhere high up in a treetop, the incessant plaintive cheep of a young hawk. Arkady and Bazarov lay in the shade of a small haystack, putting under themselves 2 armfuls of dry and rustling but still greenish and fragrant grass. "That aspen tree," began Bazarov, "reminds me of my childhood. It grows at the edge of the clay pits where the bricks were dug, and in those days I believed firmly that that clay pit and aspen tree possessed a peculiar talismanic power. I never felt bored near them. I didn't understand then that I was not bored because I was a child. Well, now I'm grown up. The talisman's lost its power." "How long did you live here altogether?" asked Arkady. 2 years on end. Then we traveled about. We led a roving life, wandering from town to town for the most part." "And has this house been standing long?" "Yes, my grandfather built it, my mother's father." "Who was he, your grandfather?" "Devil knows, some second major. He served with Suvorov and was always telling stories about the crossing of the Alps. Inventions, probably. You have a portrait of Suvorov hanging in the drawing room. I like these dear little houses like yours. They're so warm and old-fashioned. And there's always a special sort of scent about them. A smell of lamp oil and clover, Bazarov remarked, yawning. And the flies in those dear little houses. Pho! Tell me, began Arkady after a brief pause, were they strict with you when you were a child? You can see what my parents are like. They're not a severe sort. Are you fond of them, Yevgeny? I am, Arkady. How fond they are of you. Bazarov was silent for a little. You know what I'm thinking about? He brought out at last, clasping his hands behind his head. No, what is it? I'm thinking life is a happy thing for my parents. My father at 60 is fussing around, talking about palliative measures, doctoring people, playing the bountiful master with the peasants. Having a festive time, in fact. And my mother's happy too. Her days so chock full of duties of all sorts, and sighs and groans that she's no time even to think of herself. While you? I think. Here I lie under a haystack. The tiny space I occupy is so infinitely small in comparison with the rest of space in which I am not, and which has nothing to do with me. And the period of time in which it is my lot to live is so petty beside the eternity in which I have not been and shall not be. And in this atom, this mathematical point, the blood is circulating, the brain is working and wanting something. Isn't it loathsome? Isn't it petty? Allow me to remark that what you're saying applies to men in general. You're right, Bazarov cut in. I was going to say that they now, my parents I mean, are absorbed and don't trouble themselves about their own nothingness. It doesn't sicken them, while I feel nothing but weariness and anger. Anger? Why anger? Why? How can you ask why? Have you forgotten? I remember everything, but still I don't admit that you have any right to be angry. You're unlucky, I'll allow, but phew, then you, Arkady Nikolaevich, I can see, regard love like all modern young men. Cluck, 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 you call to the hen, but if the hen comes near you, you run away. I'm not like that. But that's enough of that. What can't be helped, it's shameful to talk about. He turned over on his side. Aha, there goes a valiant ant dragging off a half-dead fly. Take her, brother, take her. Don't pay any attention to her resistance. It's your privilege as an animal to be free from the sentiment of pity. Make the most of it. Not like us conscientious, self-destructive animals. You shouldn't say that, Yevgeny. When have you destroyed yourself? Bazarov raised his head. That's the only thing I pride myself on. I haven't crushed myself, so a woman can't crush me. Amen. It's all over. You shall not hear another word from me about it. Both the friends lay for some time in silence. Yes, began Bazarov, man's a strange animal. When one gets a side view from a distance of the dead, alive life our fathers lead here, one thinks, what could be better? You eat and drink and know you are acting in the most reasonable, most judicious manner, but if not, you're devoured by ennui. One wants to have to do with people if only to abuse them. One ought so to order one's life that every moment in it should be of significance. Arkady affirmed reflectively. I dare say what's of significance is sweet, however mistaken. One could make up one's mind to what's insignificant even, but pettiness, that's what's insufferable. Pettiness doesn't exist for a man so long as he refuses to recognize it. What you've just said is a commonplace reversed. What? What do you mean by that term? I'll tell you. Saying, for instance, that education is beneficial, that's a commonplace. But to say that education is injurious, that's a commonplace turned upside down. There's more style about it, so to say, but in reality, it's one and the same. And the truth is, where? Which side? Where? Like an echo, I answer, where? You're in a melancholy mood today, Evgeny. Really? The sun must have softened my brain, I suppose, and I can't stand so many raspberries either. In that case, a nap's not a bad thing, observed Arkady. Certainly, only don't look at me. Every man's face is stupid when he's asleep. But isn't it all the same to you what people think of you? I don't know what to say to you. A real man ought not to care. A real man is one whom it's no use thinking about, whom one must either obey or hate. It's funny, I don't hate anybody, observed Arkady after a moment's thought. And I hate so many. You are a soft-hearted, mawkish creature. How could you hate anyone? You're timid, you don't rely on yourself much. And you, interrupted Arkady, do you expect much of yourself? Have you a high opinion of yourself? Bazarov paused. When I meet a man who can hold his own beside me, he said, dwelling on every syllable, then I'll change my opinion of myself. Yes, hatred. You said, for instance, today as we passed our steward Philip's cottage, it's the one that's so nice and clean. Well, you said Russia will come to perfection when the poorest peasant has a house like that. And every one of us ought to work to bring it about. And I felt such a hatred for this poorest peasant, this Philip or Sidor, for whom I'm to be ready to jump out of my skin and who won't even thank me for it. And why should he thank me? Why, suppose he does live in a clean house while the nettles are growing out of me. Well, what do I gain by it? Hush, Evgeny. If one listened to you today, one would be driven to agreeing with those who reproach us for want of principles. You talk like your uncle. There are no general principles. You've not made out that even yet. There are feelings. Everything depends on them. How so? Why, I, for instance, take up a negative attitude by virtue of my sensations. I like to deny. My brain's made on that plan, and that's all about it. Why do I like chemistry? Why do you like apples? By virtue of our sensations. It's all the same thing. Deeper than that, men will never penetrate. Not everyone will tell you that, and in fact, I shan't tell you so another time. What, and is honesty a matter of the senses? I should rather think so. Evgeny. Arkady was beginning in a dejected voice. Well, what, isn't it to your taste? Broke in Bazarov. No, brother, if you've made up your mind to mow down everything, don't spare your own legs. But we've talked enough metaphysics. Nature breathes the silence of sleep, said Pushkin. He never said anything of the sort, protested Arkady. Well, if he didn't, as a poet he might have, and ought to have said it. By the way, he must have been a military man. Pushkin never was a military man. Why, on every page of him there's to arms for Russia's honor. Why, what stories you invent. I declare it's positive calumny. Calumny? That's a mighty matter. What a word he's found to frighten me with. Whatever charge you make against a man, you may be certain he deserves 20 times worse than that in reality. We had better go to sleep, said Arkady in a tone of vexation. With the greatest pleasure, answered Bazarov. But neither of them slept. A feeling almost of hostility had come over both the young men. 5 minutes later, they opened their eyes and glanced at one another in silence. Look, said Arkady suddenly. A dry maple leaf has come off and is falling to the earth. Its movement is exactly like a butterfly's flight. Isn't it strange? Gloom and decay, like brightness and light. Oh, my friend Arkady Nikolaevich, cried Bazarov, one thing I entreat of you, no fine talk. I talk as best I can. and I declare it's perfect despotism. An idea came into my head. Why shouldn't I utter it? Yes, and why shouldn't I utter my ideas? I think that fine talk's positively indecent. And what is decent? Abuse? Ha ha! You really do intend, I see, to walk in your uncle's footsteps. How pleased that worthy imbecile would have been if he had heard you. What did you call Pavel Petrovich? I called him very justly an imbecile. But this is unbearable, cried Arkady. Aha! Family feelings spoke there, Bazarov commented coolly. I've noticed how obstinately it sticks to people. A man's ready to give up everything and break with every prejudice. But to admit that his brother, for instance, who steals handkerchiefs, is a thief, that's too much for him. And when one comes to think of it, my brother, mine, and no genius, that's an idea no one can swallow. It was a simple sense of justice spoke in me, and not in the least family feeling, retorted Arkady passionately. But since that's a sense you don't understand, since you haven't that sensation, you can't judge of it. In other words, Arkady Kirsanov is too exalted for my comprehension. I bow down before him and say no more. Don't, please, Yevgeny. We shall really quarrel at last. Arkady, do me a kindness. I entreat you, let us quarrel for once in earnest. But then perhaps we should end by fighting? Put in Bazarov. Well, here on the hay, in these idyllic surroundings, far from the world and the eyes of men, it wouldn't matter. But you'd be no match for me. I'd have you by the throat in a minute. Bazarov spread out his long, cruel fingers. Arkady turned round and prepared as though in jest to resist. But his friend's face struck him as so vindictive. There was such menace in grim earnest in the smile that distorted his lips and in his glittering eyes that he felt instinctively afraid. Ah, so this is where you have got to, the voice of Vassily Ivanovich was heard saying at that instant. And the old army doctor appeared before the young men, garbed in a homemade linen pea-jacket with a straw hat, also homemade, on his head. I've been looking everywhere for you. Well, you've picked out a capital place, and you're excellently employed, lying on the earth, gazing up to heaven. Do you know there's a special significance in that? I never gaze up to heaven except when I want to sneeze, growled Bazarov. And turning to Arkady, he added, in an undertone, pity he interrupted us. Come, hush, whispered Arkady, and he secretly squeezed his friend's hand. But no friendship can long stand such strain. I look at you, my youthful friends, Vassily Ivanovich was saying meantime, shaking his head and leaning his folded arms on a rather cunningly bent stick of his own carving, with a Turk's figure for a top. I look, and I cannot refrain from admiration. You have so much strength, such youth and bloom, such abilities, such talents, positively a Castor and Pollux. Get along with you, going off into mythology, commented Bazarov. You can see at once that he was a great Latinist in his day. Why, I seem to remember you gained the silver medal for Latin prose, didn't you? The Dioscuri, repeated Vassily Ivanovich. Come, shut up, father, don't show off. Once in a way, it's surely permissible, murmured the old man. However, I have not been seeking for you, gentlemen, to pay you compliments, but with the object in the first place of announcing to you that we shall soon be dining. And secondly, I wanted to prepare you, Yevgeny. You are a sensible man. You know the world, and you know what women are, and consequently, you will excuse... Your mother wished to have a Te Deum sung on the occasion of your arrival. You must not imagine that I am inviting you to attend this Thanksgiving. It is over indeed now, but Father Alexei, the village priest, well, yes, the priest, he is to dine with us. I did not anticipate this and did not even approve of it, but it somehow came about. He did not understand me, and, well, Arina Vlasyevna, besides, he's a worthy, reasonable man. He won't eat my share at dinner, I suppose, queried Bazarov. Vassily Ivanovich laughed. How you talk. Well, that's all I ask. I'm ready to sit down to table with any man. Vassily Ivanovich set his hat straight. I was certain before I spoke, he said, that you were above any kind of prejudice. Here am I, an old man at 62, and I have none. Vassily Ivanovich did not dare to confess that he had himself desired the Thanksgiving service. He was no less religious than his wife. And Father Alexei very much wanted to make your acquaintance. You will like him, you'll see. He's no objection even to cards. And he sometimes, but this is between ourselves, positively smokes a pipe. All right, we'll have a round of whist after dinner, and I'll clean him out. We shall see. That remains to be seen. I know you're an old hand, said Bazarov with a peculiar emphasis. Vassily Ivanovich's bronzed cheeks were suffused with an uneasy flush. For shame, Yevgeny, let bygones be bygones. Well, I'm ready to acknowledge before this gentleman I had that passion in my youth, and I have paid for it too. How hot it is, though. Let me sit down with you. I shan't be in your way, I hope. Oh, not at all, answered Arkady. Vassily Ivanovich lowered himself, sighing into the hay. Your present quarters remind me, my dear sirs, he began, of my military bivouacking existence. The ambulance halts somewhere like this under a haystack, and even for that we were thankful. He sighed. I have had many experiences in my life. For example, if you will allow me, I will tell you a curious episode of the plague in Bessarabia. For which you got the Vladimir Cross, put in Bazarov. We know. By the way, why is it you're not wearing it? Why, I told you that I have no prejudices, muttered Vassily Ivanovich. He had only the evening before had the red ribbon unpicked off his coat. And he proceeded to relate the episode of the plague. Why, he's fallen asleep, he whispered all at once to Arkady, pointing to Yevgeny and winking good-naturedly. Yevgeny, get up, he went on aloud. Let's go in to dinner. Father Alexei, a good-looking stout man with thick, carefully combed hair, with an embroidered girdle round his lilac silk cassock, appeared to be a man of much tact and adaptability. He made haste to be the first to offer his hand to Arkady and Bazarov, as though understanding beforehand that they didn't want his blessing, and he behaved himself in general without constraint. He neither derogated from his own dignity, nor gave offense to others. He vouchsafed a passing smile at the seminary Latin and stood up for his bishop. Drank 2 small glasses of wine, but refused a third. Accepted a cigar from Arkady, but did not proceed to smoke it, saying he would take it home with him. The only thing not quite agreeable about him was a way he had of constantly raising his hand with care and deliberation to catch the flies on his face, sometimes succeeding in smashing them. He took his seat at the green table, expressing his satisfaction at so doing in measured terms, and ended by winning from Bazarov 2.5 rubles in paper money. They had no idea of even reckoning in silver in the house of Arina Vlasyevna. She was sitting, as before, near her son. She didn't play cards. Her cheek, as before, propped on her little fist. She only got up to order some new dainty to be served. She was afraid to caress Bazarov, and he gave her no encouragement. He did not invite her caresses, and besides, Vassily Ivanovich had advised her not to worry him too much. Young men are not fond of that sort of thing, he declared to her. It's needless to say what the dinner was like that day. Timofeyich in person had galloped off at early dawn for beef. The steward had gone off in another direction for turbot, perch, and crayfish. For mushrooms alone, 42 kopecks had been paid the peasant women in copper. But Arina Vlasyevna's eyes, bent steadfastly on Bazarov, did not express only devotion and tenderness. In them was to be seen sorrow also, mingled with awe and curiosity. There was to be seen, too, a sort of humble reproachfulness. Bazarov, however, was not in a humor to analyze the exact expression of his mother's eyes. He seldom turned to her, and then only with some short question. Once he asked her for her hand. For luck, she gently laid her soft little hand on his rough, broad palm. "Well," she asked after waiting a little, "has it been any use?" "Worse luck than ever," he answered with a careless laugh. "He plays too rashly," pronounced Father Alexei, as it were compassionately, and he stroked his beard. "Napoleon's rule, good father, Napoleon's rule," put in Vassily Ivanovich, leading an ace. "It brought him to St. Helena, though," observed Father Alexei, as he trumped the ace. "Wouldn't you like some currant tea, Anyusha?" inquired Arina Vlasyevna. Bazarov merely shrugged his shoulders. "No," he said to Arkady the next day. "I'm off from here tomorrow. I'm bored. I want to work, but I can't work here. I'll come to your place again. I've left all my apparatus there, too. In your house, one can, at any rate, shut oneself up. While here, my father repeats to me, 'My study is at your disposal. Nobody shall interfere with you.' And all the time, he himself is never a yard away. And I'm ashamed somehow to shut myself away from him. It's the same thing, too, with Mother. I hear her sighing the other side of the wall, and if one goes into her, one has nothing to say to her." "She'll be very much grieved," observed Arkady, "and so will he." "I shall come back again to them." "When?" "Why, when on my way to Petersburg." "I feel sorry for your mother particularly." "Why is that? Has she won your heart with strawberries, or what?" Arkady dropped his eyes. "You don't understand your mother, Yevgeny. She's not only a very good woman, she's very clever, really. This morning she talked to me for half an hour, and so sensibly, interestingly. I suppose she was expatiating upon me all the while? We didn't talk only about you. Perhaps lookers-on see most. If a woman can keep up half an hour's conversation, it's always a hopeful sign. But I'm going all the same. It won't be very easy for you to break it to them. They're always making plans for what we are to do in a fortnight's time. No, it won't be easy. Some demon drove me to tease my father today. He had one of his rent-paying peasants flogged the other day. And quite right, too. Yes. You needn't look at me in such horror. He did quite right, because he's an awful thief and drunkard. Only my father had no idea that I, as they say, was cognizant of the facts. He was greatly perturbed, and now I shall have to upset him more than ever. Never mind. Never say die. He'll get over it." Bazarov said, "Never mind," but the whole day passed before he could make up his mind to inform Vassily Ivanovich of his intentions. At last, when he was just saying good night to him in the study, he observed with a feigned yawn, "Oh, I was almost forgetting to tell you. Send to Fyedots for our horses tomorrow." Vassily Ivanovich was dumbfounded. "Is Mr. Kirsanov leaving us then?" "Yes, and I'm going with him." Vassily Ivanovich positively reeled. "You are going?" "Yes, I must. Make the arrangements about the horses, please." "Very good," faltered the old man. "To Fyedots. Very good. Only, how is it?" "I must go to stay with him for a little time. I'll come back here again later." "Ah, for a little time. Very good." Vassily Ivanovich drew out his handkerchief and, blowing his nose, doubled up almost to the ground. "Well, everything shall be done. I had thought you were to be with us a little longer. 3 days. After 3 years, it's rather little, Yevgeny. But I tell you, I'm coming back very soon. It's necessary for me to go." "Necessary? Well, duty before everything. So, the horses shall be in readiness. Very good. Arina and I, of course, did not anticipate this. She has just begged some flowers from a neighbor. She meant to decorate the room for you." Vassily Ivanovich did not even mention that every morning, almost at dawn, he took counsel with Timofeyich, standing with his bare feet in his slippers and pulling out with trembling fingers one dog-eared ruble note after another, charged him with various purchases, with special reference to good things to eat and to red wine, which, as far as he could observe, the young men liked extremely. Liberty is the great thing. That's my rule. I don't want to hamper you, not... He suddenly ceased and made for the door. We shall soon see each other again, Father, really. But Vassily Ivanovich, without turning around, merely waved his hand and was gone. When he got back to his bedroom, he found his wife in bed and began to say his prayers in a whisper so as not to wake her up. She woke, however. "Is that you, Vassily Ivanovich?" she asked. "Yes, mother. Have you come from Anyusha? Do you know, I'm afraid of his not being comfortable on that sofa. I told Anfisushka to give him your traveling mattress and the new pillows. I should have given him our feather bed, but I seem to remember he doesn't like too soft a bed." "Never mind, mother. Don't worry yourself. He's all right. Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner," he went on with his prayer in a low voice. Vassily Ivanovich was sorry for his old wife. He didn't mean to tell her overnight what a sorrow there was in store for her. Bazarov and Arkady set off the next day. From early morning, all was dejection in the house. Anfisushka let the tray slip out of her hands. Even Fenichka was bewildered and was reduced to taking off his boots. Vassily Ivanovich was more fussy than ever. He was obviously trying to put a good face on it, talked loudly, and stamped with his feet. But his face looked haggard, and his eyes were continually avoiding his son. Arina Vlasyevna was crying quietly. She was utterly crushed, and couldn't have controlled herself at all if her husband had not spent 2 whole hours early in the morning exhorting her. When Bazarov, after repeated promises to come back, certainly not later than in a month's time, tore himself at last from the embraces detaining him, and took his seat in the coach, when the horses had started, the bell was ringing, and the wheels were turning round, and when it was no longer any good to look after them and the dust had settled, and Timofeyich, all bent and tottering as he walked, had crept back to his little room, when the old people were left alone in their little house, which seemed suddenly to have grown shrunken and decrepit too, Vassily Ivanovich, after a few more moments of hearty waving of his handkerchief on the steps, sank into a chair, and his head dropped onto his breast. "He has cast us off. He has forsaken us," he faltered. "Forsaken us. He was bored with us. Alone. Alone," he repeated several times. Then Arina Vlasyevna went up to him, and leaning her gray head against his gray head, said, "There's no help for it, Vasya. A son is a separate piece, cut off. He's like the falcon that flies home and flies away at his pleasure. While you and I are like funguses in the hollow of a tree. We sit side by side and don't move from our place. Only I am left you unchanged forever, as you for me." Vassily Ivanovich took his hands from his face and clasped his wife, his friend, as warmly as he had never clasped in youth. She comforted him in his grief. Chapter 22. In silence, only rarely exchanging a few insignificant words, our friends traveled as far as Fyodot's. Bazarov was not altogether pleased with himself. Arkady was displeased with him. He was feeling, too, that causeless melancholy which is only known to very young people. The coachman changed the horses and, getting up onto the box, inquired, "To the right or to the left?" Arkady started. The road to the right led to the town, and from there home. The road to the left led to Madame Odintsov's. He looked at Bazarov. "Evgeny?" he queried. "To the left?" Bazarov turned away. "What folly is this?" he muttered. "I know it's folly," answered Arkady. "But what does that matter? It's not the first time. Bazarov pulled his cap down over his brows. As you choose, he said at last. Turn to the left, shouted Arkady. The coach rolled away in the direction of Nikolskoye. But having resolved on the folly, the friends were even more obstinately silent than before, and seemed positively ill-humored. As soon as the butler met them on the steps of Madame Odintsov's house, the friends could perceive that they had acted injudiciously in giving way so suddenly to a passing impulse. They were obviously not expected. They sat rather a long while, looking rather foolish in the drawing room. Madame Odintsov came in to them at last. She greeted them with her customary politeness, but was surprised at their hasty return. And, so far as could be judged from the deliberation of her gestures and words, she was not over-pleased at it. They made haste to announce that they had only called on their road and must go on farther to the town within 4 hours. She confined herself to a slight exclamation, begged Arkady to remember her to his father, and sent for her aunt. The princess appeared very sleepy, which gave her wrinkled old face an even more ill-natured expression. Katya was not well. She didn't leave her room. Arkady suddenly realized that he was at least as anxious to see Katya as Anna Sergeyevna herself. The 4 hours were spent in insignificant discussion of one thing and another. Anna Sergeyevna both listened and spoke without a smile. It was only quite at parting that her former friendliness seemed, as it were, to revive. I have an attack of spleen just now, she said. But you must not pay attention to that, and come again, I say this to both of you, before long. Both Bazarov and Arkady responded with a silent bow, took their seats in the coach, and without stopping again anywhere went straight home to Marino, where they arrived safely on the evening of the following day. During the whole course of the journey, neither one nor the other even mentioned the name of Madame Odintsov. Bazarov, in particular, scarcely opened his mouth and kept staring in a side direction away from the road with a kind of exasperated intensity. At Marino, everyone was exceedingly delighted to see them. The prolonged absence of his son had begun to make Nikolai Petrovich uneasy. He uttered a cry of joy and bounced about on the sofa, dangling his legs, when Fenichka ran to him with sparkling eyes and informed him of the arrival of the young gentleman. Even Pavel Petrovich was conscious of some degree of agreeable excitement, and smiled condescendingly as he shook hands with the returned wanderers. Talk, questions followed. Arkady talked most, especially at supper, which was prolonged long after midnight. Nikolai Petrovich ordered up some bottles of porter, which had only just been sent from Moscow, and partook of the festive beverage till his cheeks were crimson, and he kept laughing a half-childish, half-nervous little chuckle. Even the servants were infected by the general gaiety. Dunyasha ran up and down like one possessed, and was continually slamming doors, while Pyotr was, at 3 o'clock in the morning, still attempting to strum a Cossack waltz on the guitar. The strings gave forth a sweet and plaintive sound in the still air, but with the exception of a small preliminary flourish, nothing came of the cultured valet's efforts. Nature had given him no more musical talent than all the rest of the world. But meanwhile, things were not going over harmoniously at Marino, and poor Nikolai Petrovich was having a bad time of it. Difficulties on the farm sprang up every day. Senseless, distressing difficulties. The troubles with the hired laborers had become insupportable. Some asked for their wages to be settled, or for an increase of wages, while others made off with the wages they had received in advance. The horses fell sick. The harness fell to pieces as though it were burnt. The work was carelessly done. A threshing machine that had been ordered from Moscow turned out to be useless from its great weight. Another was ruined the first time it was used. Half the cattle sheds were burnt down through an old blind woman on the farm going in windy weather with a burning brand to fumigate her cow. The old woman, it is true, maintained that the whole mischief could be traced to the master's plan of introducing newfangled cheeses and milk products. The overseer suddenly turned lazy and began to grow fat as every Russian grows fat when he gets a snug berth. When he caught sight of Nikolai Petrovich in the distance, he would fling a stick at a passing pig, or threaten a half-naked urchin to show his zeal. But the rest of the time he was generally asleep. The peasants who had been put on the rent system didn't bring their money at the time due, and stole the forest timber. Almost every night the keepers caught peasants' horses in the meadows of the farm, and sometimes forcibly bore them off. Nikolai Petrovich would fix a money fine for damages, but the matter usually ended after the horses had been kept a day or two on the master's forage by their returning to their owners. To crown all, the peasants began quarreling among themselves. Brothers asked for a division of property. Their wives couldn't get on together in one house. All of a sudden, the squabble, as though it had given signal, came to a head, and at once the whole village came running to the counting-house steps, crawling to the master, often drunken and with battered face, demanding justice and judgment. Then arose an uproar and clamor, the shrill wailing of the women mixed with the curses of the men. Then one had to examine the contending parties and shout oneself hoarse, knowing all the while that one could never anyway arrive at a just decision. There were not hands enough for the harvest. A neighboring small owner with the most benevolent countenance contracted to supply him with reapers for a commission of 2 rubles an acre, and cheated him in the most shameless fashion. His peasant women demanded unheard-of sums, and the corn, meanwhile, went to waste. And here they were not getting on with the mowing, and there the Council of Guardians threatened and demanded prompt payment in full of interest due. "I can do nothing," Nikolai Petrovich cried more than once in despair. "I can't flog them myself. And as for calling in the police, Captain, my principles don't allow of it, while you can do nothing with them without the fear of punishment." "Du calme, du calme," Pavel Petrovich would remark upon this. But even he hummed to himself, knitted his brows, and tugged at his mustache. Bazarov held aloof from these matters, and indeed as a guest it was not for him to meddle in other people's business. The day after his arrival at Arina, he set to work on his frogs, his infusoria, and his chemical experiments, and was forever busy with them. Arkady, on the contrary, thought it his duty, if not to help his father, at least to make a show of being ready to help him. He gave him a patient hearing, and once offered him some advice, not with any idea of its being acted upon, but to show his interest. Farming details did not arouse any aversion in him. He used even to dream with pleasure of work on the land, but at this time his brain was swarming with other ideas. Arkady, to his own astonishment, thought incessantly of Nikolskoye. In former days he would simply have shrugged his shoulders if anyone had told him that he could ever feel bored under the same roof as Bazarov. And that roof his father's. But he actually was bored and longed to get away. He tried taking long walks till he was tired, but that was no use. In conversation with his father one day, he found out that Nikolai Petrovich had in his possession rather interesting letters, written by Madame Odintsov's mother to his wife. And he gave him no rest till he got hold of the letters, for which Nikolai Petrovich had to rummage in 20 drawers and boxes. Having gained possession of these half-crumbling papers, Arkady felt, as it were, soothed, just as though he had caught a glimpse of the goal towards which he ought now to go. "I mean that for both of you," he was constantly whispering. She had added that herself. I'll go, hang it all." But he recalled the last visit, the cold reception, and his former embarrassment and timidity got the better of him. The go-ahead feeling of youth, the secret desire to try his luck, to prove his worth in solitude without the protection of anyone whatever, gained the day at last. Before 10 days had passed after his return to Marino, on the pretext of studying the working of the Sunday schools, he galloped off to the town again, and from there to Nikolskoye. Urging the driver on without intermission, he flew along like a young officer riding to battle. And he felt both frightened and light-hearted, and was breathless with impatience. The great thing is, one mustn't think, he kept repeating to himself. His driver happened to be a lad of spirit. He halted before every public house saying, "A drink or not a drink?" But to make up for it, when he had drunk, he didn't spare his horses. At last, the lofty roof of the familiar house came in sight. "What am I to do?" flashed through Arkady's head. "Well, there's no turning back now." The three horses galloped in unison. The driver whooped and whistled at them, and now the bridge was groaning under the hoofs and wheels, and now the avenue of lopped pines seemed running to meet them. There was a glimpse of a woman's pink dress against the dark green. A young face peeped out from under the light fringe of a parasol. He recognized Katya, and she recognized him. Arkady told the driver to stop the galloping horses, leaped out of the carriage and went up to her. "It's you," she cried, gradually flushing all over. "Let us go to my sister. She's here in the garden. She will be pleased to see you." Katya led Arkady into the garden. His meeting with her struck him as a particularly happy omen. He was delighted to see her, as though she were of his own kindred. Everything had happened so splendidly. No butler, no formal announcement. At a turn in the path, he caught sight of Anna Sergeyevna. She was standing with her back to him. Hearing footsteps, she turned slowly round. Arkady felt confused again, but the first words she uttered soothed him at once. "Welcome back, runaway," she said in her even, caressing voice, and came to meet him, smiling and frowning to keep the sun and wind out of her eyes. "Where did you pick him up, Katya?" "I have brought you something, Anna Sergeyevna," he began, "which you certainly don't expect." "You have brought yourself. That's better than anything." Chapter 23. Having seen Arkady off with ironical compassion, and given him to understand that he was not in the least deceived as to the real object of his journey, Bazarov shut himself up in complete solitude. He was overtaken by a fever for work. He didn't dispute now with Pavel Petrovich, especially as the latter assumed an excessively aristocratic demeanor in his presence, and expressed his opinions more in inarticulate sounds than in words. Only on one occasion Pavel Petrovich fell into a controversy with the nihilist on the subject of the question then much discussed of the rights of the nobles of the Baltic province. But suddenly he stopped of his own accord, remarking with chilly politeness, "However, we cannot understand one another. I, at least, have not the honor of understanding you." "I should think not," cried Bazarov. "A man's capable of understanding anything. How the ether vibrates and what's going on in the sun. But how any other man can blow his nose differently from him, that he's incapable of understanding." "What, is that an epigram?" observed Pavel Petrovich inquiringly, and he walked away. However, he sometimes asked permission to be present at Bazarov's experiments, and once even placed his perfumed face, washed with the very best soap, near the microscope to see how a transparent infusoria swallowed a green speck, and busily munched it with two very rapid sort of clappers which were in its throat. Nikolai Petrovich visited Bazarov much oftener than his brother. He would have come every day, as he expressed it, to study if his worries on the farm had not taken off his attention. He didn't hinder the young man in his scientific researches. He used to sit down somewhere in a corner of the room and look on attentively, occasionally permitting himself a discreet question. During dinner and supper time, he used to try to turn the conversation upon physics, geology, or chemistry, seeing that all other topics, even agriculture, to say nothing of politics, might lead, if not to collisions, at least to mutual unpleasantness. Nikolai Petrovich surmised that his brother's dislike for Bazarov was no less. An unimportant incident among many others confirmed his surmises. The cholera began to make its appearance in some places in the neighborhood, and even carried off 2 persons from Arina itself. In the night, Pavel Petrovich happened to have rather severe symptoms. He was in pain till the morning, but did not have recourse to Bazarov's skill. And when he met him the following day, in reply to his question why he had not sent for him, answered, still quite pale, but scrupulously brushed and shaved, "Why, I seem to recollect you said yourself you didn't believe in medicine." So the days went by. Bazarov went on obstinately and grimly working. And meanwhile, there was in Nikolai Petrovich's house one creature to whom, if he did not open his heart, he at least was glad to talk. That creature was Fenichka. He used to meet her for the most part early in the morning, in the garden or the farmyard. He never used to go to her room to see her, and she had only once been to his door to inquire, ought she to let Mitya have his bath or not. It was not only that she confided in him, that she was not afraid of him. She was positively freer and more at ease in her behavior with him than with Nikolai Petrovich himself. It is hard to say how it came about. Perhaps it was because she unconsciously felt the absence in Bazarov of all gentility, of all that superiority which at once attracts and overawes. In her eyes, he was both an excellent doctor and a simple man. She looked after her baby without constraint in his presence, and once when she was suddenly attacked with giddiness and headache, she took a spoonful of medicine from his hand. Before Nikolai Petrovich, she kept, as it were, at a distance from Bazarov. She acted in this way not from hypocrisy, but from a kind of feeling of propriety. Pavel Petrovich she was more afraid of than ever. For some time he had begun to watch her, and would suddenly make his appearance as though he sprang out of the earth behind her back, in his English suit, with his immovable, vigilant face and his hands in his pockets. "It's like a bucket of cold water on one," Fenichka complained to Dunyasha, and the latter sighed in response, and thought of another heartless man. Bazarov, without the least suspicion of the fact, had become the cruel tyrant of her heart. Fenichka liked Bazarov, but he liked her too. His face was positively transformed when he talked to her. It took a bright, almost kind expression, and his habitual nonchalance was replaced by a sort of jesting attentiveness. Fenichka was growing prettier every day. There is a time in the life of young women when they suddenly begin to expand and blossom like summer roses. This time had come for Fenichka. Dressed in a delicate white dress, she seemed herself slighter and whiter. She was not tanned by the sun, but the heat from which she could not shield herself spread a slight flush over her cheeks and ears. And, shedding a soft indolence over her whole body, was reflected in a dreamy languor in her pretty eyes. She was almost unable to work. Her hands seemed to fall naturally into her lap. She scarcely walked at all, and was constantly sighing and complaining with comic helplessness. "You should go oftener to bathe," Nikolai Petrovich told her. He had made a large bath covered in with an awning in one of his ponds, which had not yet quite disappeared. "Oh, Nikolai Petrovich, but by the time one gets to the pond, one's utterly dead, and coming back, one's dead again. You see, there's no shade in the garden." "That's true, there's no shade," replied Nikolai Petrovich, rubbing his forehead. One day, at 7 o'clock in the morning, Bazarov, returning from a walk, came upon Fenichka in the lilac arbor, which was long past flowering, but was still thick and green. She was sitting on the garden seat and had, as usual, thrown a white kerchief over her head. Near her lay a whole heap of red and white roses, still wet with dew. He said good morning to her. "Ah, Yevgeny Vassilievich," she said, and lifted the edge of her kerchief a little to look at him, in doing which her arm was left bare to the elbow. "What are you doing here?" said Bazarov, sitting down beside her. "Are you making a nosegay?" "Yes, for the table at lunch. Nikolai Petrovich likes it." "But it's a long while yet to lunchtime. What a heap of flowers." I gathered them now, for it will be hot then and one can't go out. One can only just breathe now. I feel quite weak with the heat. I'm really afraid whether I'm not going to be ill. What an idea. Let me feel your pulse. Bazarov took her hand, felt for the evenly beating pulse, but didn't even begin to count its throbs. You'll live 100 years, he said, dropping her hand. Ah, God forbid, she cried. Why? Don't you want a long life? Well, but 100 years. There was an old woman near us, 85 years old, and what a martyr she was. Dirty and deaf and bent and coughing all the time. Nothing but a burden to herself. That's a dreadful life. So it's better to be young? Well, isn't it? But why is it better? Tell me. How can you ask why? Why, now, while I'm young, I can do everything. Go and come and carry, and needn't ask anyone for anything. What can be better? And to me, it's all the same whether I'm young or old. How do you mean, it's all the same? It's not possible what you say. Well, judge for yourself, Feodosia Nikolaevna. What good is my youth to me? I live alone, a poor, lonely creature. That always depends on you. It doesn't at all depend on me. At least someone ought to take pity on me. Fenichka gave a sidelong look at Bazarov, but said nothing. What's this book you have? She asked after a short pause. That's a scientific book. Very difficult. And are you still studying? And don't you find it dull? You know everything already, I should say. It seems not everything. You try to read a little. But I don't understand anything here. Is it Russian? Asked Fenichka, taking the heavily bound book in both hands. How thick it is. Yes, it's Russian. All the same, I shan't understand anything. Well, I didn't give it to you for you to understand. I wanted to look at you while you were reading. When you read, the end of your little nose moves so nicely. Fenichka, who had set to work to spell out in a low voice the article on creosote she had chanced upon, laughed and threw down the book. It slipped from the seat onto the ground. I like it too when you laugh, observed Bazarov. Nonsense. I like it when you talk. It's just like a little brook babbling. Fenichka turned her head away. What a person you are to talk, she commented, picking the flowers over with her finger. And how can you care to listen to me? You have talked with such clever ladies. Ah, Feodosia Nikolaevna, believe me, all the clever ladies in the world are not worth your little elbow. Come, there's another invention, murmured Fenichka, clasping her hands. Bazarov picked the book up from the ground. That's a medical book. Why do you throw it away? Medical? Repeated Fenichka, and she turned to him again. Do you know, ever since you gave me those drops, do you remember, Mitya has slept so well. I really can't think how to thank you. You are so good, really. But you have to pay doctors, observed Bazarov with a smile. Doctors, you know yourself, are grasping people. Fenichka raised her eyes, which seemed still darker from the whitish reflection cast on the upper part of her face, and looked at Bazarov. She didn't know whether he was joking or not. If you please, we shall be delighted. I must ask Nikolai Petrovich. Why? Do you think I want money? Bazarov interposed. No. I don't want money from you. What then? Asked Fenichka. What? Repeated Bazarov. Guess. A likely person I am to guess. Well, I will tell you. I want one of those roses. Fenichka laughed again and even clapped her hands, so amusing Bazarov's request seemed to her. She laughed and at the same time felt flattered. Bazarov was looking intently at her. By all means, she said at last, and bending down to the seat, she began picking over the roses. Which will you have, a red or a white one? Red. And not too large. She sat up again. "Here, take it," she said, but at once drew back her outstretched hand and, biting her lips, looked towards the entrance of the arbor, then listened. "What is it?" asked Bazarov. "Nikolai Petrovich?" "No. Mr. Kirsanov has gone to the fields. Besides, I'm not afraid of him. But Pavel Petrovich, I fancied..." "What?" "I fancied he was coming here." "No, it was no one. Take it." Fenichka gave Bazarov the rose. "On what grounds are you afraid of Pavel Petrovich?" "He always scares me, and I know you don't like him. Do you remember you always used to quarrel with him? I don't know what your quarrel was about, but I can see you turn him about like this and like that." Fenichka showed with her hands how, in her opinion, Bazarov turned Pavel Petrovich about. Bazarov smiled. "But if he gave me a beating," he asked, "would you stand up for me?" "How could I stand up for you?" "But no one will get the better of you." "Do you think so?" "But I know a hand which could overcome me if it liked." "What hand?" "Why, don't you know, really? Smell how delicious this rose smells you gave me." Fenichka stretched her little neck forward and put her face close to the flower. The kerchief slipped from her head onto her shoulders. Her soft mass of dark, shining, slightly ruffled hair was visible. "Wait a minute. I want to smell it with you," said Bazarov. He bent down and kissed her vigorously on her parted lips. She started, pushed him back with both her hands on his breast, but pushed feebly, and he was able to renew and prolong his kiss. A dry cough was heard behind the lilac bushes. Fenichka instantly moved away to the other end of the seat. Pavel Petrovich showed himself, made a slight bow, and saying with a sort of malicious mournfulness, "You are here," he retreated. Fenichka at once gathered up all her roses and went out of the arbor. "It was wrong of you, Yevgeny Vassilievich," she whispered as she went. There was a note of genuine reproach in her whisper. Bazarov remembered another recent scene, and he felt both shame and contemptuous annoyance. But he shook his head directly, ironically congratulated himself on his final assumption of the part of the gay Lothario, and went off to his own room. Pavel Petrovich went out of the garden and made his way with deliberate steps to the copse. He stayed there rather a long while, and when he returned to lunch, Nikolai Petrovich inquired anxiously whether he were quite well. His face looked so gloomy. "You know, I sometimes suffer with my liver," Pavel Petrovich answered, tranquil.